Hello, my name is Brad Boyce. I'm a coordinator for seminaries and institutes, and I've worked in the online space for seminaries and institutes for a good part of my career and wanted to share some ideas for effective virtual seminary and institute classes. Some of you may have already been teaching some of these, and some of you might be considering it for the first time, and wanted to share some of the first things that I would consider in deciding if and how I would implement using virtual seminary classes. First, what are some of the advantages? First off, you get to be together when separated by distance or by extenuating circumstances you can't be together. Second is you get to hold class at a set time where everybody can make time in their schedule to be there, whether it be early morning, after school, during the day. There's a set time to attend seminary or institute. Third, you get to see and hear one another, similar to what we experience in a normal flow of a conversation within a class, and it provides a similar experience to that. What are some of the challenges inherent in a virtual class? And these are just some. Technology, sometimes access to it can be difficult. The internet connection of each individual user impacts the overall experience. And because of that, there can be some sound issues and being able to hear and see one another effectively. In a virtual environment, sometimes the distractions going on in each individual person's home or wherever they're at can cause for some passive participation and multitasking. And it can be hard to engage learners in active learning experiences via web conferencing. So I've prepared just some ideas that I would consider in starting a virtual seminary institute class, and they are the following. First, pick the tool best for your situation. Second, avoid the talking head. Third, the eyes have it, and know the tools and translate the skills. And so I want to talk briefly about each one of these. First off, you need to pick the tool best for your situation. And when I say tool, I mean web conferencing solution. You need to consider accessibility, who has access to it, if it's available on all different types of devices, the cost to the teacher, and if there's a cost for students, the bandwidth needed for that particular tool. Some web conferencing options are wonderful for 3 to 5 people, but over that, it requires a lot of pull on the bandwidth, and sometimes they're not as reliable when it comes to quality of video and audio. And lastly, one thing to consider is, are there good tools for engagement? Besides a good video and good audio, are there ways and means to engage students meaningfully in that learning environment? This screen you see here, you can hit pause if you would like, but it talks about costs and bandwidth and advantages for these 4. Now, any of these 4 might not be ones you use where you live, and that is just fine. You need to find a tool that works best and involves stake leaders and SNI personnel with some good advice as to what might be helpful there. Second, avoid the talking head. Now this comes from a talk from Elder Richard G. Scott that he gave to Seminary and Institute teachers. In the Gospel Teaching and Learning Handbook, it states the following. It is common for teachers to become excited about the scripture block they will be teaching and the truths they have discovered. Through diligent effort to study, understand, and be taught by the Spirit, teachers are edified and naturally feel a desire to communicate what they learned during lesson preparation. Now, this isn't unique. This is all gospel settings, but note this. While this may be appropriate, it should be remembered that the purpose of any lesson is for students to understand the scriptures, be taught by the Holy Ghost, and feel encouraged to apply what they learn. This almost always requires more than teachers telling students what they themselves have learned from the scriptures and why they feel it is important. It also involves more than a teacher reading a verse and commenting on it, and then reading another verse. In my time working with distance seminary options, in virtual environments, it often can become a talking head where it's just the teacher talking and sharing the things that they've learned. And again, it's harder to engage the learners to do so. Why do we need to try to still involve the learners in that environment? Let's take a look here at Elder Scott, at what he teaches us about involving the students and helping them use agency even in a distributed environment.
Never, and I mean never, give a lecture where there's no student participation. A talking head is the weakest form of class instruction. Assure that there's abundant participation, because that use of agency by a student authorizes the Holy Ghost to instruct it also helps the student retain your message. As students verbalize truths, they are confirmed in their souls and strengthen their personal testimony.
I love that thought of helping students to use their agency effectively, even in a virtual class this way. A couple other thoughts from the Gospel Teaching and Learning Handbook on avoiding a teacher-centered class and more of a student-centered focus in a web conferencing class. The Gospel Teaching and Learning Handbook states, using a variety of teaching methods can also help reach students who learn in different ways. Teaching methods are learning activities that require students to use a variety of senses, such as seeing, hearing, and touching, can improve the students' participation and their recollection of what is taught. Also in the Gospel Teaching and Learning Handbook, when using teacher presentation, as when using any teaching method, teachers should continually be assessing students' receptivity by asking themselves questions like, are my students interested and focused? And do they understand what is being presented? And so for the remainder of this video, I'd like to share some ideas that will enhance this opportunity to read a class, how well they're receiving what's being shared, how active they're participating, and how we might be able to help them use that agency in more effective ways. I've called this the eyes have it. And what do I mean by that? Here's some principles that I think are key with a virtual Seminary Institute class. First, they need to see and hear one another, teachers and students. The students must prepare for the day. They must get dressed, comb their hair, and be ready for the class. And once it's time for class to start, they must turn on their camera and turn on their audio so that they can be seen and heard by their teacher and peers. So it feels like a class, like they're present there in class. Additionally, they need to learn effective use of audio tools in the web conferencing solution. So being able to mute or unmute, or to use headphones to not pick up additional sound around where they're at. All are different important things for them to be able to participate so that you as a teacher can see and gather information as to whether or not they're receiving that information that's being shared with them. Next, I'd like to talk about knowing the tools and translating the skills. Each of the different web conferencing tools that you will select have different tools that help you translate things that you do in the classroom into an online or virtual environment. An example is raising your hand. How do you raise hands effectively in a virtual environment? If you as a teacher can't see everyone, sometimes it's hard to see or to know who has questions, and so taking turns and timing in conversations sometimes can be frustrating in a virtual environment. And so how can we learn some skills that are related to the web conferencing tool and translate them into teaching opportunities? So the first tool I like to talk about is a text chat tool. And the text chat tool is a way for them to type a message and everyone else in the class could see it, or they could send it directly to you as the teacher. This is an example from one of the tools that I showed here. They could type a message, hit enter, and everybody in the class can see it. Raising your hand is one way to use the text chat. You could ask a question of the students, and you could ask them simply to type ready when they have found the answer, or ready with an answer to your question. And so they can go ahead, type in ready when it's quick. If you're reviewing doctoral mastery, you could ask them to type in a reference or to type in a phrase, and that allows everybody to send a message in. Some other ways, so quick response is what I've talked about, is one, but one of the best things the text chat tool allows is for everybody to share something meaningful that they can take time and respond to. You could ask a fill the truth importance question, or an apply question, or a deepening understanding question. You can give them time to type. They type out their response and hit enter, and then everyone can read or hear what everyone else says without having to take turns talking, which would take up time in that virtual class. But this way you can hear from one another. You could have them identify principles or identify particular things that they see in scriptures. And so this allows you as a teacher one way to take turns and for everyone to participate, to make sure that they're not asleep or not participating that way. Another tool is to use visuals. Elder Scott also said this. He said, today many students can capture a concept more easily visually then through the written word. The use of an appealing visual aid can clarify truth, but such visual aid should not be used to entertain or draw attention to oneself. An effective visual aid is like a hook in the mind to which truth can be carefully secured so that it can be understood, remembered, and used in the time of need. If a teacher never uses visuals and only just uses their webcam to project their own image, again, back to that idea of variety of senses, it's harder to engage students or to maintain interest. Below here are some different things that you could do with visuals. You could share your screen. Many of the tools allow you to share what's on your computer screen. So you could just have a picture or something on your screen, and you could share that. It's an easy way to share images, PowerPoint slides, or quotations, and allows for a variety of students what they're looking at as they're listening there in class. And again, I love the caution here to not spend too much time, but it does allow for that variety of senses in teaching a virtual class. One example of this is in one of the tools that I showed to you here, is you could show the scriptures this way, and there is some annotation tools. The student could click here, and then they could be asked to mark something on the screen. And so there are different skills that allow you to translate some of those things that you do in class and to show them in a virtual environment this way. And so visuals are very helpful, and this annotation tool or whiteboard tool is common amongst a lot of those different web conferencing options. Next, I'd like to talk about the purposeful calling on of students. So in Doctrine and Covenants, section 88, verse 122, it says, "Appoint among yourselves a teacher, and let not all be spokesmen at once, but let one speak at a time, and let all listen to his sayings. That when all have spoken, that all may be edified of all, and that every man have an equal privilege." And just like in a classroom, there are some challenges of helping this happen in a virtual environment. So one idea that I would have recommended is, is to create a chart of your students. And so these are just pictures of students in an online class, and you could print that out, and then what you do is as you teach or as they respond to different things, you track who participates so that all might have an opportunity to share. You could keep a tally mark next to each student who has participated and how they have participated. One other important thing to help students be more willing to verbalize so that they're ready to share is to look for questions ahead of time and give them enough time to prepare to find an answer to that particular thing. And so if they know they're going to be called on, again, it's hard for them to read that they're going to be called on because they might not see you 100% of the time. But if you give look-fors and know what's coming their way, it will help them prepare for that. One way to do this is using the text chat tool. You could give them a look-for question, and then you could say, once you are ready, I want you to go ahead and hit ready in the text chat. And then that lets you see who is ready and who is not ready. And then whoever is not ready, you could call on and say, hey, so-and-so, are you ready to respond? If you could put that in the text chat, that would be great. Now, some of you are in team teaching situations. And so often, one teacher will be teaching and the other teacher will be also on the virtual class. And the other teacher could be watching the videos and watching the chat to be able to give some information to the other teacher, to be that extra set of eyes to see if a student's zoning out, not participating. In a tool like this, that teacher might be able to change this from everyone to that individual student and send a private message to them to make sure that they are with you and to participate in that way. Lastly, one other idea is to establish expectations and cues. And what I mean by cues is cues help you know where students are at in the learning process. And so these need to be a little bit more overt in a virtual environment than in a class that you're face-to-face. A lot of students will have their phone as their tool to participate in that class, so expect them to use more than their ears while in the virtual class. Make sure that they have their scriptures and marking pens or pencils, something right there for them to use. If they can't mark their scriptures or read their scriptures because their phone is on the web conferencing call, it's hard for them to be able to participate that way. So we need to make sure that they will have other things here. And I love this picture of the student engaged in an online class with their scriptures and their keyboard. A couple of ideas of cues that you could establish. One was that idea of that text chat. The other one is a thumbs up. You could have them literally hold up their thumb in front of their camera when they're ready, after they have accomplished the task. Hold up your pen. You could ask them to hold up their scriptures to the camera once they are there. So there are ways, cues for you once you've asked a question to know who you can call on to elicit participation from them. One other idea I have done in the past is it takes some time to get used to these tools and how to use them effectively. And so one thing that I would recommend is practice some tools for fun. And so this is a slide that I found from a friend of hidden images. So there's a banana and a baseball and a bowling pin somewhere in here. And as students are gathering at the beginning of class and signing on, I often put this up and have them turn on the annotation tool or the whiteboard tool, and they go ahead and circle those things. And so it's something fun for them to talk back and forth and to use some of those tools as a way to practice using them, so when you use them in class, they become more and more natural. So in review, number one, pick the best tool for your situation and make this be a council decision between stake leaders and the teachers and with people who know technology and what might be easiest for students to use. Avoid the talking head once you do start class. It can be a trap, but it's important to be meaningful in eliciting meaningful participation from the students. Third, the eyes have it. They need to have their camera on, they need to have good audio, and they need to be dressed and ready for the day so it feels like they are present in class. And fourth, and this will take time, but is know the tool, learn the tools of that virtual environment, and then translate those skills that you already know how to do in a face-to-face environment through those tools that you use in that virtual environment. And I've just shared a few here, and this by no means is meant to cover all of those topics, but at least a video to start you on the road to helping students to have a meaningful experience in a distributed and virtual environment, which, as we have seen, is used at important times and will continue to be a meaningful way to use this technology the Lord has provided to hasten His work in this time. Thank you very much.